And away they roll.
Certainly a good start from McMahon, who should take the lead in the first corner. Tower in second, got the two Walkinshaws, Norm Mogg and Aidan Aisley, the next two through. And then it should be Gary Kerwin. Well, he's got the Greek Boyle Skyline down the outside of him. And then we've got the Bluebirds, two of the Nissan Bluebirds, Adam Workman and Brian Henderson cars. And it's the 15, that's Henderson leading the 16. There's the Juicy ex-Graham Crosby VK Commodore Group A car back in behind them as well.
You know, I got to love this part of the track as well. When you see the flame outs coming out the back of the Nissan there, or the side of the Nissan, and we'll see a bit of that as they go around. But those Nissans, absolutely impeccable. Of course, built by the Fred Gibson world.
Well, I don't think Fred had anything to do with this one, did he?
Oh, I think
that's an overseas car.
Oh, good point. Yeah, so there are a couple of those that have come into Australia, and that's a fantastic car to see the 15 and the 16 out there together. I was talking with Adam, and he actually said that yesterday in the wet was a bit difficult, but at the same time it was just great to have the cars on the track.
And there goes the Workman Bluebird. Of course, Nissan's pretty popular as far as the front runner goes from about 1982, 83 onwards. Certainly in the in 1984, when these cars are presented in, were quite quick. Pole position at Bathurst for the 1984 1000
with George Fury.
And certainly that Saturday was one of the coldest days I've ever had at Bathurst. It snowed in the morning, so it was ideal weather conditions for a turbocharged Bluebird.
And they turned up the wick and said, there we go. And I think that record was held for how many years?
Yeah, it went for a while. It wasn't a record as such because it was a qualifying shootout time, but it was a quick time. It was about a 14 or something, I think, from memory.
Yeah.
Anyway, someone pinched a brake there somewhere around, it might have been Boyle in that skyline. That VK Commodore, because Graham Cosby came into racing from bikes, a New Zealander, and was quite strong in the early days of Group A in the Commodore.
Yeah, the interesting thing, speaking about the Commodores, is that Taylor Kennedy car was the original Taylor Kennedy car that was put on the track as a VB Commodore.
Yeah.
And then they updated it through to VC, and then it actually raced at Bathurst in 1980 in VC in a 6-cylinder, guys. Never raced as a V8 at VC form, then got converted again to VH for 1982 and 1983.
When it was a 6-cylinder car, it was in the Recar colours, wasn't
That's
it?
right, yeah. So it certainly has gone through some different paint schemes and now being kept and happily looked after in the VH scheme, as you can see there, the Taylor Kennedy car.
And giving the Gerard K. Alf Grant formerly run Walkinshaw, and unfortunately Greg Boyle has stopped, and that looks to be on track somewhere. Not sure where that is. It looks like, is that on the inside of out of turn 5? Looks to be that way.
Absolutely. So
that's in a precarious place, and going on the sports sedans where the one was off the track and got hit, I would be putting a yellow flag safety car situation out on that.
As we can see, the speed has increased from yesterday. They are hitting the straight and getting higher kilometres per hour. But still, the corner one, we're just seeing a bit of tentative. Looks like it's still just got a few wet pieces down there.
Yeah, the odd wet patch is still out there, but certainly a lot better than the conditions were yesterday. And just harking back to where our race leader is at the moment, and he's got a fairly handy lead, about 6.4 seconds on Tower. Mogg in third spot, Aisley in fourth, and Steve Axia's just passed Workman. I'm just going to say that I think Workman might have just dropped off the track just momentarily.
When you look at these Sierras and you look at Kerry McMahon's car, he has so much happiness that he's got that car out there singing. And there are a couple of them that are back on the track. We heard that John Bow's going to drive his original 18 car in New Zealand in the coming weeks, I think. but certainly having a little bit of turbo lag, I've heard. But when it comes on song and they keep it on song, it's just incredible power.
Well, it's interesting, thinking back to the June meeting, the historic meeting, John O'Webb raced his dad, Steve Webb's car. Steve was out of the country, so...
The Caltex car?
Yeah, and that car actually broke the Group A lap record here for Heritage Touring Cars. And what they've done with that, they've actually detuned it and made it far more manageable. And I think we've got a safety car situation now because of that Skyline that stopped out of Turn 5. But the point I was making there was that the car is far more, as John O said at the time, it's far more drivable than what the light switch type performance. It's easier on its tyres and it's producing the times that other Sierras are doing in this configuration.
Well, I think the other thing that we can say is that from the time when these cars were raced to now, the tyre technology has come so far. And, you know, talking with some of the guys here that are racing behind the driver's seat of these cars, they are talking about the fact that the rubber holds to the track better, that they can get real grip both in the dry and the wet. It's something to see through the years of that progress.
Well, that's a problem too with the tyre technology you talk about, because in some of the earlier historic categories like JKL, etc., a better gripping tyre puts more strain on suspension mechanicals, and we've seen that many years ago at Amaru Park. I can't remember who it was, but a car going off at Mazda House because the suspension broke because the tyres were hanging on so well.
While we're under safety car, let's have a chat about that BMW that you were talking about there. So being originally the Brock 05 BMW?
No, it was originally a JPS car.
Uh-huh.
And then because
right.
they moved on to Sierras and Brock was out of the Holden deal, that they purchased the two JPS cars to run under the Mobile banner. And that's the way they ran them till they sold them on to the Peter Dorm and John Cotter group that ran them, and now David Tao has one of those cars and he's restored it back in that resplendent JPS colour scheme. Yeah, even to the point where it's running the black number on the white background, because at the time they wanted to run the gold lettering number, but because of the CAMS regulations about that it has to be a black or a white number on the contrasting background, they weren't allowed to do it, which is a bit of a shame. But to be period correct, which they have to be for a certificate of description, they have to run as they did in the day. And that's why you pick a car out, and there was several Walkinshaw cars went 90, 91, 92, where you look at Aisley's car, for instance, that runs a 6-speed Hollinger, I think, whereas you look at the Gerald Cade Alf Grant car that Gary Kerwin's got, that runs a 5-speed Getrag, because that's the period they picked for that car.
And it's quite interesting to me to see some of that amazing history of racing drivers. So just back to the David Tao car just for a moment. When we talk about when it was originally out, you know, you talk about in that team, you had Jim Richards, you had Longhurst, then you've got
Ludwig Finau was part of that team, and they ran a third car in some of the AMPS car meetings back in the day. We're going back to green. And the rain looks like it's about to return for us.
Well, I think it is.
It is. It's on the straight this time.
So a couple of them there just... yes, the rain is coming down. It's certainly a quick shower.
Down. Well, anyone out there listening will know that the fact that it is bucketing down.
And not only that, it is apparently being a passing shower and lots of wind coming with it. That'll be interesting for those on dry tyres out there.
Some of them may have started, and that wind's really picked up.
Yeah, the slicks certainly make it interesting. So let's just watch the guys taking it fairly carefully, particularly the turbo vehicles. And we can see there some of the other guys as well that are on potentially older tyres. Oh, a little wiggle from the Nissan number 16 at the front there.
I think everyone will be off the throttle now. This could prove to be quite dangerous if they're on their dry tyres, and Tao's had a spin out of turn 5, and luckily the Skyline got moved.
Yeah, luckily, because that's right in that spot.
It was a little bit further up, just over the crest of that hill. That's where it stopped. And I'd suspect that David Tao is on a dry tyre. And David Tao wants to keep this car intact. He's off to Tasmania for the Baskerville Historics, which I think's on next weekend. So he's basically will just quickly pack up and head straight to Victoria after this meeting to get on the boat to go to Tasmania, land at Devonport, and then get the car down to Hobart for the Baskerville event.
I was speaking to one of the guys there driving the cars yesterday, and he said, look, I was just on and off the throttle all the way around the track, and the ability for the cars just to lose that rear end so quickly with the power that they've got and the way they're set up, the size of the tyres, it's very easy to see them go sideways.
Certainly it is indeed, and we're looking at the ex-Taylor Kennedy car going through, Steve Axia driving it. I think he was in a XU1, a Group C XU1 prior to this, so he's obviously made that move to get into a different sort of car, a later Group C car, you might say, because the Tirana was a Group C car in '73 before the SLR 5000s came along, and David Tao's going to put his away, I think, from this.
And Steve actually was talking this morning that this weekend is the first time that he's had a true ability to put it on the racetrack for him. I mean, obviously it's been that way for other owners, but that car that we're talking about is one that he has really only had a test, and then he's come here to this weekend.
And you can see there the Rick Allen car we're just having a look at, as I said, was a DNF out of yesterday's race at a puncher, ran over something he suspected, and ran off the track up at out of turn 9 heading towards turn 10. And he was a bit concerned that if it was going to rain today, he might have not been able to start because he didn't have a spare wet. But he was hoping he had someone who was endeavouring to bring a wet out for that car. And there's the ex-Peter Williamson Toyota Celica coming down the straight now.
One of those cars that had a big camera in it.
It did. There was a couple of there's an ex-Bailey Chickadee Celica running as well, and that was originally a Peter Williamson car. So this was, I think the Bailey car was the one they had to put the axe into the boot to get the boot open. Memory serves me right.
That was the 70, I think it was 76, 77 car.
And this is the later car that Peter Williamson drove.
And when we look at these Toyota Celicas, that is just, again, another car that was impeccably built. Peter Williamson certainly spent a lot of time on it, but most of all, I remember the character behind the wheel and how he used to talk us around Bathurst in those early years.
Oh, yeah, when he could see the fast cars coming. Here comes Dickie, go. Watching the Green's Tough Falcon go breezing past all the...
I think some of the other racing drivers said, you got to put a camera in my car because it's certainly looking like Peter Williamson's having too much fun.
Yeah, and then being held up by the Camaros going down through the S's. I can remember that.
Yeah, with KB.
There's a 57 Henderson Leslight Gemini, the one we spoke about that was hit by KB in, I think it was 1981. And there's another of the Geminis as well. The Vern Young, that's a coupe. That was a later car.
You know, I got to look at these cars, and the coupe is so different to the sedan, but seeing them both running on the track pretty closely together, and also in front of some of the bigger engine Commodores, it's really good to see.
Yeah, and a lot of that's to do with our race conditions as well, that it would be like that. But that's what the cards you dealt with, so that's what you go with.
That there is one of the coupes out there as well that has CDT on the back, and for anybody who may remember or doesn't know, that was Country Dealer Team. So with Brock having the Holden Dealer Team, the Country Dealer Team was a group that prepared the Geminis and said, we'll take them racing.
Jim Fanico and co.
Right.
And they did a deal later to do a Falcon which was marketed as a Dick Johnson. It was a turbocharged 6-cylinder XE Falcon, because the Ford didn't have a V8 in the XE range.
And it's great to see also the Craven Mild car out there as well, which is a VC, and first raced as actually a VC.
So Gary Chick driving that car. That's obviously a Alan Grice steered car at some stage. Grice
and Smith.
John Smith, because John Smith still see it at historic meetings, comes out. And last time I seen John Smith other than a racetrack was in Bunnings, would you believe? Buying some paint.
Now the turbo cars have come to the fore here. We've got a Sierra followed by the two Nissans in form order, or 16 first before 15.
That's Workman and Henderson.
And they are looking very good, but it's Kerry McMahon at the front in the Sierra. That is just certainly getting a gap on these two Nissans.
So they're actually on their final lap for the first of two races today. And Kerry McMahon has a 5-second plus lead on this pair.
Key to this is that every one of these cars that are out on the track as either Group C or Group A have a former history in motorsport. These are not made up vehicles for the purpose of taking them racing. No. They actually have a history. They
have to be coloured correctly, stickered correctly. That's why they are issued with a certificate of description. And the two Nissans just going out of turn 5 up to turn 6. In the meantime, Kerry McMahon is about turn 7, I would figure, at about this stage, leading this on the last lap.
About to come up onto the last corner before the main straight to take the checkered flag. And all of the cars looking spectacular. They've just had a clean while they're out there getting some rain on them.
Yeah, the ones that have stayed on the track. Otherwise, they get pretty dirty. And you come through turn 8. Kerry McMahon just up the road a little bit. There he is in the left-hand drive. I think it was the only left-hand drive Sierra that was built for Australian conditions.
And there was a reason for that. He wanted to go faster with the left-hand drive and win Bathurst, which the car did.
Yep. Yeah, and Thomas Mazzira was involved in that win in more ways than one, as Kerry McMahon now takes the checkered flag, in the fact that Frank didn't have any contacts within Wolf Racing, who they were dealing with, but Thomas Mazzira did. And unfortunately, Gary Kerwin has gone off. It looks to be turn 5. He's had a spin there, so that's been a bit of a arduous corner today. That's caught out quite a few cars, not only in this category, but in other categories as well. So he's back underway, fortunately, no damage.
We used to say 05 is alive, and that's turn 5.
Yes. Yeah, I always felt that they should have called turn 1 the Chupan Sweeper. Good
Instead
name.
It's the it's the Moffat corner.
Yeah.
And then the Bond corner number 2, and then Brock corner 05.
Yep. So the rest of the cars come down to take their checkered flag. We're going to take a quick break. We've got HQ Holden's back out for their third race, and then we've got the lunchtime demonstrations happening, and a good chance to get down to the cafe. Also, while I must mention too, and I was remiss that I didn't do this earlier, the foundation, the Australian Motor Heritage Foundation, which is over down on the western side of the grandstand, is open today to visitors from 12:30 to 2:30 p.m. Well worthwhile going to have a look, and this is a history of our sport that you can actually see, and it's growing and growing all the time.
They're doing some amazing things down there. They're digitising all of the race results from the history of motorsport in Australia. They've got a range of articles, magazines, books, all of the details of motoring heritage. So it's not just about motorsport, but on a much broader basis about motoring heritage. And in complement with that, the marquee that's just behind garages 1 and 2 and 3, 1 to 4 there's a big marquee which is celebrating the 70th anniversary of the Australian Racing Drivers Club this weekend.
Yep, certainly. That's why this event is called the Super 70. We're going to take a break now. We're back shortly with HQ Holdens.